Welcome back. Against the backdrop of the Israel-Hamas war, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will chair a virtual summit of the G20 leaders. Today, Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of South Africa, Naledi Pandor, will represent President Cyril Ramaphosa at the virtual summit. The G20 is a premier forum for international economic cooperation, which brings together the world's major economies to advance global economic stability. For more on this, let's now speak to our SABC News correspondent, Neha Poonia. Neha, good morning. Thank you so much for making time for us. Just quickly, just a brief look at the G20 Summit Agenda and what is on that agenda before we look into the politics of it all.
That's right. When the G20 summit was held here in New Delhi just over 2 months ago, at its conclusion, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi had said that world leaders need to do more to walk the talk, which is why he proposed the organization of a virtual summit which would follow up on the promises made at the in-person summit. And this is what this meeting on Wednesday evening is going to be about, to look at what sort of progress countries have made on issues like climate finance, debt relief for developing nations, as well as other issues that are plaguing countries of the global south. This is also coming at a time when Mr. Modi has held what India has called the second Voice of the Global South Summit. The aim, India says, and it's something it's reiterated through its G20 presidency, which will end later this year, is that it wants to use these international platforms to further the agenda and needs of developing countries, whose priorities sometimes get buried because of ongoing geopolitics at play. And that's what the idea behind the virtual summit on Wednesday is going to be.
Yeah. And when we look back at what happened 2 months ago with the G20 meeting, is that President Xi Jinping of China didn't attend. It was major news. And now we also hear that this time around he will also not be attending this particular summit. And instead, the Foreign Affairs Minister will be representing him, as well as South Africa's President, President Cyril Ramaphosa, will not be attending the summit. What should we read into this?
Most experts say it's not altogether surprising that President Xi is skipping the virtual summit as well. Back in September, when China first confirmed that President Xi will not be traveling to New Delhi, India had said that this is common. There's not always full attendance when these sort of summits are held in person. But of course, many experts read that as a snub, saying it's got to do with the ongoing border standoff between India and China that's now gone on for 3 years. And bilateral ties between the two countries have not been at their best. We had India's foreign minister hosting his Australian counterpart in New Delhi yesterday, where again the question of China's increasing presence and activities in the Indo-Pacific came up as well. So from India's perspective, this is something to be expected, experts say. As far as South Africa is concerned, that is something that is, experts say, a bit surprising given the close ties between both nations. But we also saw Mr. Modi skip that extraordinary meeting of the BRICS Plus grouping that was called by the South African president on Tuesday. And this might be, experts say, an attempt to keep divergences on ongoing geopolitical issues away from impacting bilateral ties. But, it's still going to be sharply in focus. And India admits that the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict is likely to dominate the agenda at the G20 virtual summit on Wednesday.
Yeah. And considering, of course, that virtual meeting that happened yesterday that was chaired by the President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, and as you've indicated, Narendra Modi again was not present for that particular meeting. Do you think that it would set the tone for the G20 meeting that will be taking place, the G20 summit rather, that will be taking place?
It was surprising that Prime Minister Modi chose to skip that BRICS Plus virtual meeting, particularly given the sort of role that India has seen for itself in that grouping. But experts say it's understandable. Officials said it had to do with prior commitments of the Indian Prime Minister. We're currently bang in the middle of election season in many states, and he's been busy campaigning for his party right before general elections take place next year as as well. We saw the sort of comments that were made by India's foreign minister, who condemned Hamas's attack on Israel, asked for terrorism to be held to account, while also calling for humanitarian, long-lasting solutions in Gaza. But there was a big difference in how India spoke on the issue and how BRICS nations spoke on the issue. And it's quite likely that the summit today will see similar discussions as well. But of course, given the presence of Western countries like the entire European Union, the United States as well, we might see a more pro-Israel commentary from this particular grouping, experts are saying.
Yeah. And finally, of course, that meeting taking place today, the meeting taking place on Wednesday, and all of this happening at the same time, just a day after the cabinet of Israel has agreed to that truce that has been brokered by Qatar. How do you think that element would be playing out? And also considering, as you've now pointed out, the Western nations and where they stand with regards to this ongoing war between Israel and Hamas?
We are likely to see similar sort of comments that have been made, for example, at forums like the United Nations General Assembly, is what experts are pointing to, because this is a grouping that is dominated by some of the world's wealthiest nations. Like I said, the European Union, you have the US as well as other developed countries from the rest of the world as well that take a lead at a forum like this. India, for its part, is going to try and keep the focus on developmental challenges for developing countries, it says, but we might see references to the truce that is now trying to be worked out in Gaza and the role that Western countries have played in it. But what's going to be interesting also is that Russia's President Vladimir Putin is going to attend, so it'll be interesting to watch what he says about the conflict, especially given the sort of blame game that's been going on between Russia and China and the West on this particular issue playing out in Gaza.
Thank you so much for your time. SABC News correspondent there, Neha, Poonia.